Do not sleep with certain objects beside you. This warning may sound strange, even old-fashioned, like something whispered by an anxious elder, but across Asia, there is a long-held belief the objects you keep close while you sleep may invite the unseen, and some objects are not meant to be kept at all. Tonight, we begin with a true story from Hong Kong, one that shows how a single item placed on a nightstand can change the course of a person's life. In the late 1990s, Hong Kong was a city at its peak. High-rise apartments gleamed along the harbor, neon lights pulsed above crowded streets, and prosperity seemed to touch every family in some way. Among the thousands of families living in public housing blocks was a middle-aged woman we'll call Ellen. Ellen was in her mid-50s. Then, a si lai, a Cantonese term for a housewife auntie, often portrayed as talkative, sharp-tongued, but also deeply rooted in the rhythms of her neighborhood. She was not poor, quite the opposite. Ellen had done well in life. Her husband's business investments and property holdings had allowed her to live comfortably without ever needing to work. Along with a small circle of close friends, also well-off middle-aged women, Ellen spent much of her time traveling abroad, sampling new cuisines, and indulging in leisure. One summer, the group decided on Chiang Mai, Thailand, a package tour of temples, waterfalls, and markets. Everything was arranged: flights, hotels, sightseeing. For several days, they followed their tour guide through crowded bazaars and serene temple grounds, marveling at golden Buddhas and buying silk scarves in bright colors. But on their final evening, one of the women mentioned something curious. She had a distant relative living in Thailand who had told her about a local shaman, a man performing a rare ritual that very night. It wasn't on the tour itinerary. The address was scrawled on the back of a hotel napkin, passed to the group with a hint of excitement. The women were curious. They joked about asking for more luck in stocks or blessings for long lives. They weren't particularly superstitious, but curiosity and boredom led them down a narrow alley to a modest single-story building. Inside, the air felt thick, humid, heavy with incense smoke. This was not a Buddhist temple. No golden statues, no chanting monks. Instead, oil lamps flickered dimly against cracked plaster walls. Strange talismans hung from the beams, their paper edges curling in the heat. On the floor, a circle of locals sat solemnly, their eyes fixed on the shaman at the center. Ellen and her friends shuffled to the side, trying to blend in. For nearly an hour, the ritual unfolded. Low chants, sudden cries, bursts of smoke rising from burning offerings. To Ellen, it was equal parts fascinating and unnerving, like stepping into a scene from one of those Thai horror movies she had once laughed through on late-night TV. At the end, the shaman rose and held up 3 objects, worn strings of prayer beads, dark with age. Through a translator, it was explained that these beads were blessed, carrying fortune and protection, that they were not for sale. They would be given to 3 lucky attendees. The crowd surged forward. Some dozens of hands shot up. Helen raised hers too, without even thinking, and somehow hers was one of the 3 chosen. Her friends laughed, half envious, half joking. You said to the lucky one, "If you get rich from these, treat us all to dinner." Ellen smiled, clutching the beads tightly. They felt rough and strangely warm in her hand. The shaman gave simple instructions. The beads must be worn only at night, just before sleep. A short mantra had to be recited, syllables in Thai that Ellen memorized like a tune, repeating them softly until they stuck in her mind. If followed faithfully, fortune and prosperity would come. That night, back at the hotel, Ellen slipped the beads over her neck, whispered the mantra in front of the mirror, and climbed into bed smiling. The trip ended the next day. The women flew back to Hong Kong, their suitcases stuffed with souvenirs. But for Ellen, the most important item was already resting beside her bed: the beads. Back home, she followed the ritual exactly. Each night, before sleep, she would place the beads around her neck, recite the mantra in a whisper, and then set them down on her nightstand, always beside her bed. Calm. The 2 weeks, nothing happened. No sudden wealth, no stroke of luck, but then something strange began. At first, it was only a whisper, a voice just behind her ear, in a language she didn't understand. She thought it was her imagination, the echo of the Thai syllables she had been repeating. But the voice returned the next night, and the night after that, each time louder, closer. Then her hands began to move on their own. One evening, as she recited the mantra in the bathroom mirror, Ellen's fingers curled and twisted in the air, drawing unfamiliar shapes, seals, symbols, motions she did not recognize, but her body seemed to know. She stared in horror, unable to stop her own limbs. She told herself it was nonsense. She would simply stop. No more beads, no more chanting. But it was too late. The voice no longer needed the ritual. It whispered in her ear even during the day. At night, Ellen began to wake at exactly 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, sitting upright in bed, her hands still moving in the dark. And then came the dreams. Every night, the same vision. She was no longer herself. She was a man, lean and sun-darkened, standing inside a wooden hut in humid air. Across from him was a young woman, crying, screaming in anger. Their argument was fierce, violent. Then suddenly, he was standing on the rooftop of a tall building. The wind roared, and before she could stop it, the body sprinted forward, plunging off the edge. Ellen woke screaming, her heart pounding. The dream returned again and again, each time sharper, each time more vivid, until she could feel the dirt of the hut floor, smell the sweat of rage, sense the rush of air as she leapt from the rooftop. These were not her memories, but they were inside her now. Her friends noticed her change. Ellen grew pale, her skin dry and gray, her eyes heavy. She looked as if she had aged years in only a few weeks. They asked what was wrong. She laughed it off, but each night she grew weaker, the voice stronger. Finally, she threw the beads into the trash. But the voice remained. It would not leave her side. Throwing the beads away should have been the end. At least, that's what Ellen told herself. She wrapped them in a tissue, dropped them into the bin under her kitchen sink, and closed the lid firmly. She even muttered under her breath, "That seps it, you sep are gone." But that night, as the clock struck 3:17 a.m., Ellen woke in darkness. The voice was still there, louder now, rasping at her ear. The syllables quick and urgent. She clutched her chest, whispering prayers she had not recited since childhood. And then she looked. The beads were back. Not in the trash, not hidden away, but on her nightstand, exactly where she used to place them, before bed. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, staring at the string of dark beads lying there as if they had never been touched. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Yet in that silence, Ellen could feel something else, like a second presence breathing in the room with her. In the days that followed, Ellen's condition worsened. She stopped sleeping. At night, she heard knocks on her bedroom wall, slow and deliberate. The beads would appear in different places, draped across the lamp, resting on her pillow, once even clutched in her own hand when she awoke. The dreams continued. Always the hut, always the rooftop, always the plunge into darkness. She no longer woke screaming. She woke gasping, unable to breathe, as if she too had hit the ground. Desperate, she visited doctors, neurologists, psychiatrists, even specialists who ordered scans of her brain. Nothing. She was healthy. Stress, they said. Maybe mild insomnia. But Ellen knew better. The beads were not just an object anymore. They were a tether. One morning, she remembered her tour guide from Thailand. He had been kind, patient, handling all the group's requests. Maybe he would know what to do. Ellen dug out his business card and dialed. The man listened quietly as she poured out the entire story. When she finished, there was a long silence. Finally, he said, "You need to come back." He explained that not every shaman in Thailand worked with pure intentions. Some dealt in cursed objects, beads, dolls, amulets, handed out to unsuspecting foreigners. These items were not blessings but vessels designed to anchor restless spirits. Victims would grow weaker, tormented, until desperation drove them back to the very shaman who had begun it. And, of course, removing the curse would cost money. It was a kind of spiritual extortion. The guide promised to help Ellen return, to escort her to the shaman if necessary. They booked her ticket together, but something didn't know it wanted her to leave. On the morning of her flight, Ellen packed lightly. She looked exhausted, her face pale and hollow, but there was determination in her movements. She arrived early at Kai Airport, suitcase in tow, determined to break free of this nightmare. As she queued for the security checkpoint, the voice returned, not a whisper this time, a roar. It hissed and shouted. Foreign words pressed hot against her ear. She clenched her fists, trying to ignore it, but her vision blurred. Then everything went black. Ellen collapsed to the floor. When she woke, she was in a hospital bed. Doctors told her she had fainted. No signs of stroke, no signs of seizure. Her body was fine, but they kept her overnight for observation. Her room was on the ninth floor. That night, nurses made their rounds. Everything seemed calm, but at exactly 3:47 a.m., Ellen moved. Without pressing the call bell, without making a sound, she rose from her bed, walked calmly to the window, and leapt into the darkness. By the time staff reached the ground, it was too late. News of Ellen's death spread quickly through her circle of friends. The tour guide, devastated, began warning others never to attend rituals they did not understand, never to accept free gifts from strangers, no matter how harmless they seemed. But whispers among the locals suggested something darker. They said the man Ellen saw in her dreams, the one whose body she inhabited as he leapt from the rooftop, had been a real person, perhaps another victim of the same shaman. Perhaps his spirit had been bound to those beads, seeking release by dragging someone else into death. In some traditions, it is believed that spirits who end their lives violently cannot reincarnate. They are trapped, reliving their final moments, in a loop. The only way out is substitution, finding another living soul to take their place. Ellen's recurring dreams may not have been dreams at all, but the man's final memories replayed in her mind as the spirit slowly merged with her. By the time she prepared to return to Thailand, it was already too late. The bond was complete. The fall from the ninth floor was not Ellen's choice. It was the spirit's. Some say her soul was never released, that instead it became part of the same cycle, her essence trapped within the beads for the next victim. No one knows what became of the cursed prayer beads. Some claim they were retrieved from her belongings, quietly disposed of by her family. Others whisper they were returned to the shaman, ready to be given again, free of charge, to someone else curious enough to attend a ritual. All that is certain is this: Ellen placed those beads beside her bed each night, and once she did, they never truly left her side. Not all dangers lie in objects. Sometimes the danger lies in what you give away, your own most personal details. In Hong Kong, there is an old warning: never give out your date and time of birth lightly. To most, it's simply astrology, a way to read your fortune. But in certain practices, that information called Sai Ji Sanchpas can be used in rituals of substitution. With it, someone can summon spirits to attach themselves to you, or worse, to replace you. This is the story of Jen, a young woman in her 20s, who came face to face with what is known in folklore as a replacement ghost. Jen was hardworking, bright, and successful. By her early 20s, she had become an ophthalmologist, her own apartment freshly purchased, her career just beginning to rise. She had everything ahead of her. Her closest friend since childhood was Linda. They had grown up together in the same neighborhood, inseparable as girls. But as they became adults, their paths diverged. Jen thrived academically. Linda drifted between low-paying jobs, eventually settling for part-time work at a bubble tea shop. Still, their bond endured. Jen often visited Linda's home, a cramped public housing flat on the ninth floor of a government block. The building was typical of Hong Kong's older estates: long corridors, chipped paint, humming fluorescent lights that flickered with a greenish glow. The air always carried a faint smell of damp cement and mothballs. On one evening in particular, Jen visited Linda's family for dinner. The meal was ordinary: stir-fried vegetables, salted fish, rice. Afterward, as she was about to leave, she turned toward the window and froze. Outside the large glass pane, drifting slowly past, was a figure. This face was hers. Jen's breath caught in her throat. She stared, unable to move, as her own pale, expressionless face floated silently outside the ninth floor window, its eyes fixed on her. There was no balcony, no scaffolding, no ledge for anyone to stand on. It was impossible. But by the time Linda and her parents followed her gaze, the figure was gone. The night air outside was empty, only the lights of other towers in the distance. That night, Linda Sip's mother, a woman known for her sharp tongue and loud voice, did not laugh. She took Jen aside and said seriously, "Come with me tomorrow. I'll bring you to someone who can help." True to her word, the next day she escorted Jen to a small apartment in another housing block, and inside lived a Taoist priest. The place was cluttered with ritual items, Dusty statues, bells, scrolls, a heavy wooden altar filled with incense smoke. The priest asked for Jen Sipseji, her full date and exact time of birth. He scribbled the details on yellow paper, burned incense, and muttered chants in a low voice. Finally, he burned the paper, scattered ashes into a bowl of water, and declared, "All is fine now." He slid a red envelope toward her. Out of courtesy, Jen placed some money inside. The ritual was over. She left, uneasy but hopeful. But peace did not last. Days later, after another evening spent with Linda, Jen decided to stay overnight at her friend's flat. On the walk back from dinner, she felt it, a tugging at her shirt, at first light, then stronger, like invisible fingers pulling her shoulders downward. She brushed at her clothing, but nothing was there. The sensation followed her all the way to the apartment, only vanishing once she stepped inside. That night, in the shower, her mind turned dark. Thoughts flooded in, thoughts she had never known, thoughts of ending her life. Her eyes drifted toward the bathroom shelf. A pair of scissors gleamed there, meant for trimming hair. Her hand reached for them, as if guided by someone else. She opened the blades, pressed them into her palm. Blood welled instantly. The running water mixed red around her feet. Jen was not suicidal. She was successful, optimistic, close with her family. These thoughts were not hers. It felt like someone else had slipped inside her body, pushing her toward a fate she could not understand. She snapped awake, dropped the scissors, trembling. Linda rushed in at the sound of her cries, wrapping her hand in gauze. That night, Jen barely slept, and when she did, she dreamed of a woman, middle-aged, navy dress, sitting in her clinic chair during a routine eye exam. The woman smiled at her, stiff and unblinking. Then the smile widened and widened until the mouth stretched too far, laughter spilling into the air. The woman's face blurred, shifted, until Jen was staring at herself, her own face grinning back at her. Jen awoke drenched in sweat. The next day, she confided in another friend, who brought her to an elderly medium living in a nearby block. The moment Jen stepped inside, she felt dizzy. The medium looked at her and said, "You are being followed. A woman sips spirit. She did not find you on her own. Someone gave her your path." Through trance and ritual, the medium saw more. She described the Taoist priest's apartment without Jen ever saying a word. She described the statue near the door, beneath which lay papers. On one paper was Jen's birth data. On top of it was another name, someone already dead. The medium explained, this was Tyree San substitution. When one person's Saiji is placed beneath that of a deceased soul, the living person becomes a stand-in, a target. The ghost clings to the new life, seeking release by pulling them toward the same fate. The floating double Jen saw outside Linda's window was no coincidence. It was the ghost, wearing her face, a replacement ghost. Jen was horrified. Why would the priest do such a thing? The medium suggested two possibilities. Either the priest acted on his own, binding her fate to a restless spirit for reasons she would never know, or someone had guided it, someone who wanted Jen harmed. And Jen could not ignore the uneasy thought. Linda's mother, the woman who had always resented Jen's success, who had always downplayed her achievements, was she the one who had brought her to that priest deliberately, offering Jen's information for substitution? Jen never found proof, but after the ritual cleansing performed by the medium, the dark thoughts and the double vanished. Still, she never visited Linda's apartment again. Some doors, once opened, can never be trusted again. Two stories, two very different paths into the supernatural. But beneath them lies the same warning. Not everything that enters your life should be allowed near your bed or near your soul. Let's step back for a moment and look at the cultural roots behind Ellen's prayer beads and Jen's replacement ghost. In Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, and other regions of Southeast Asia, there is a long history of ritual objects, amulets, talismans, beads, dolls believed to carry power. Some are sacred, blessed by monks, designed to protect or bring fortune. Others, however, are created through darker practices. Ellen's beads may have looked like a blessing, but their function fit closer to what locals call frongan, or cursed vessels, items intentionally imbued with restless spirits. Shamans, or occult practitioners, sometimes anchor a ghost to such an object. The ghost is trapped, bound to the physical item, unable to move on. When an unsuspecting person accepts that item and keeps it close, especially beside the bed, where the boundary between waking and dreaming thins, The spirit begins to merge with them. That detail matters. Across Asia, the bed is not just a place of sleep, it is a threshold. Nighttime hours, particularly between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., are known in many cultures as the spirit hour, when yin energy peaks and the veil between worlds grows thin. Keeping a haunted object beside you during this time is like inviting the ghosts into your most vulnerable state. Ellen's nightly chanting and placement of the beads on her nightstand essentially completed the ritual. She was not only keeping the spirit near, she was giving it permission. And once the spirit had her, it replayed its death through her dreams, binding her to its fate until the ninth floor plunge was inevitable. Jen Sep's case in Hong Kong reflects another widespread belief. The idea of a substitute body or replacement ghost. In Cantonese, a Sep's often called Taiyin San Tishin, literally body double. There are two sides to this practice. Protective substitution. Families sometimes create small effigies or paper dolls to carry away illness, bad luck, or misfortune. And the doll is symbolically sacrificed in place of the living person. It is a ritual of diversion. Let harm fall upon the substitute, not the human. Malicious substitution, far darker. This involves using someone's birth details, Saiji, or bats to entangle them with another fate. By placing their birth data beneath that of a deceased person, it symbolically positions the living as a stand-in. The restless spirit then seeks to draw them into its own death cycle. Jen's floating double, her sudden suicidal thoughts, her dream of facing herself, all are classic signs of a substitution haunting. In Chinese tradition, ghosts that died unjustly, through suicide, sudden accident, or betrayal, are believed to be trapped in a ghost loop, reliving their final emotions endlessly. The only escape is substitution, finding another soul to die in their place, freeing the original spirit to reincarnate while trapping the new victim instead. The chilling part? Often this is not random. Someone, whether through jealousy, malice, or desperation, can guide a ghost to its substitute. In Jen's case, suspicion fell on Linda's mother. Was it coincidence or calculated resentment? We will never know. Why birth details? Why is the exact time of birth so dangerous to share? In Chinese metaphysics, a person's Saiji is not just an astrological marker, it is considered the blueprint of one's destiny. With it, practitioners of Bozi or Four Pillars of Destiny can chart life paths, luck cycles, and even vulnerabilities. But in darker practices, that same blueprint can be manipulated. It is said that with someone's Spiz Saiji, a skilled occultist can bind a spirit to them, transfer karmic debts onto them, redirect curses originally meant for someone else. In essence, it provides the coordinates of your soul, and once shared, it cannot be taken back. This is why older generations warn, never give your Saiji to someone you do not trust completely. At first glance, Ellen Sep's cursed beads and Jen Sep's replacement ghost seem unrelated. One is about objects, the other about personal information, but they share three underlying truths found in many Asian traditions. Permission matters. A ghost rarely attaches without some form of invitation. Ellen accepted the beads and followed the ritual. Jen willingly handed over her birth details. Neither act seemed dangerous at the time, but both served as open doors. The bedroom is sacred and vulnerable. Spirits are believed to linger strongest at night, sleeping beside a haunted item or unknowingly sharing your identity with a ghost makes you defenseless. That is why warnings about what you keep beside your bed or what you share before sleep are taken seriously. Release comes at a cost. For Ellen, there was no release. The ghost claimed her. For Jen, only intervention from a medium saved her. In both cases, once the bond was established, breaking it was nearly impossible. To some, these are just stories, coincidences shaped into folklore, mental health, crises mistaken for possession. But in Asia, where temples stand beside skyscrapers, and incense burns in the shadows of neon lights, such beliefs remain deeply rooted. Even the most modern families might still consult fortune tellers before marriages, avoid certain apartments considered unclean, or leave offerings during Hungry Ghost Month. Because, whether or not you believe, the fear lingers. Objects can carry energy, names and dates can carry power, and what you bring beside your bed at night may not be as harmless as it seems. Ellen's beads were free. Jen's visit was friendly. Neither expected danger. Both found themselves standing at the threshold of death. So perhaps the old warnings deserve more weight than we give them. Do not accept objects from rituals you don't understand. Do not give away your birth details lightly. Do not place unfamiliar things beside your bed, because once something crosses into the space where you sleep, it may never leave. And so tonight's stories end, but the questions remain. What objects rest on your nightstand right now? Are they truly yours, or do they carry something else? When you close your eyes tonight, remember, not every gift is meant to be kept, and not every face that looks back at you is your own.